Perfect. A warm welcome to our host, Mrs. Kavita Sharma, our members and our guests. I'll begin with a brief introduction to Without Filters. It's a Zoom gathering founded in the times of physical distancing. We meet the third Saturday of the month. It's a space which supports and encourages a search for meaning through sharing of ideas and experiences, the listening and without bias or prejudice. It's a gendered space in that it's women's only. Getting through housekeeping, do ensure your microphone's on mute, that you switch off video if stepping away from the meeting, and that your mobile device is set on silent. Please submit your questions to me. We'll get through the submitted questions and then open the floor for discussion. The etymology of culture in Latin is cultus, meaning care. In French, coller, which means to till. The etymologies blend harmoniously with what anthropologist Margaret Mead recognizes as being the first sign of civilization, a femur which had been broken and then healed. A broken femur which has healed is the evidence that someone has taken time to stay with the one who fell, has bound up the wound, has carried the person to safety, and has tended the person through recovery. Helping someone else through difficulty proposes Margaret Mead is where civilization starts. Civilization, culture, heritage are intrinsic components to the continuance of human society. The traditions and living expressions which are transmitted from one generation to the next is a living heritage, is our intangible cultural heritage. They include community gatherings, oral traditions, songs, knowledge of natural spaces, healing traditions, foods, holidays, beliefs, cultural practices, skills of making handicrafts, method of agriculture and cattle breeding, traditional navigational skills, cooking skills, and winery, among others. Elements of this heritage are integral parts to rural, urban, and indigenous peoples. ICH is traditional, contemporary, and living at the same time, inclusive, representative, and community based. The French baguette entered the hallowed portal of ICH last week. The baguette, a living heritage which follows the French through life. When a baby is teething, his parents give him a tip of the baguette to chew on. When a child grows up, the first errand he carries out on his own is to go and buy a baguette at the boulangerie. For elders, buying a baguette at the boulangerie is sometimes their only daily social contact. ICH is chronically at risk of disappearing, in large part because of globalization. To address this issue, the UNESCO created the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Culture Heritage in 2003. Our host has begun the journey to protect the ICH of craftspeople and artisans in India. Kavita spent her formative years in Brazil and South America before working in Germany. Family values and lifestyle combined with visits to India fostered and cultivated a deep connection to her Indian roots. Kavita is a proponent of fertility of the mind, the awareness that a seed which drops into the fertile soil of the mind germinates and bears fruit of creativity. What began as a journey of self-discovery in 2014 at Bagru offered the seed which created her label Kala Designs. The momentous Bagru visit provided Kavita the opportunity to observe an artisan deeply absorbed in work and his sparing use of the indigo dye. When I inquired why he couldn't use more, recalls Kavita, his gentle response was, "The indigo is my friend, and I cannot exhaust it." This reverential ritual of the artisan personified the dye, referring to it with reverence and respect. The crafts of Sriklastati in South India, Maharashtra, Central India, Thar Desert, and other areas in Rajasthan in Northwest have been present in the works of her products and creations. Kavita, a member of the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, has, with the support of the heritage platform of Intash, provided the opportunity to the Govardhan Eco Village to supply cotton to artisans and to assisted clusters of Lambani, a South-style heritage embroiders, to showcase their talent. Over to you, Kavita, and thank you.
Thank you, Shireen. I think, I'm quite humbled and also very honored to be able to speak on what I do and what, cultural heritage is about. So since you've given me already a headway, I'll get straight on with the topic. We're discussing cultural heritage, and like Shireen rightly introduced, culture is a lot to do with the human civilization. It is to do with, with basically the human race and us as a society, the patterns, with changing time and such. And heritage is obviously something that we inherit, that, we get from our previous generation, from our forefathers. Interestingly, cultural heritage is divided into two, I would say broadly, broadly divisible umbrellas, like the tangible and intangible. We are going to touch upon a little bit of more details on the intangible, but I'll just give you an introduction of what this intangible cultural heritage is about. So when we talk about cultural tangible heritage, we can see like museums and monuments, buildings, forts and such, which, directly gives us a historical reconstruction of the place, of the time, of when it was built and such. And intangible cultural heritage is something which is not, it is more of an abstract. It could be like, it's a skill or a deed that is visible through us through an object or a product. Now, cultural heritage, like you rightly said, brings in the ethnological and anthropological, scientific, social, symbolic, artistic, and aesthetic values of, human existence in the past generations. So that's a little bit on the intangible cultural heritage. We'll be going a little bit into the details of it, if I may share the screen. Okay. So is that visible? And am I audible as well?
Yes, okay. You are.
So, a little bit of a graphic representation. We see here, intangible cultural heritage. Coincidentally, that's me trying to learn a craft from, in fact, one of the first trips that I was in Baguru. So it's a lot about the skill. Very interesting, like, because, being an architect and having design very much as my, trained aspect of, the formative years, I did pick up the intangible cultural heritage because, through my years of, being born and brought up outside our home country, I saw a lot of different varied cultures and, people from different backgrounds. And that made me very sensitive, like languages, even for that matter. I spoke a lot of Portuguese, in fact, only Portuguese and Hindi when we came back home. So a lot of these things really intrigued me. We saw people from different backgrounds, different cultures, picked up a lot of their traditions as well. Interestingly, also has become a part of, our daily routines at home. A lot of Brazilian food that we have also sometimes. So as a human race, there's been a lot of exchange of such values and tradition. And at the same time, we are retaining what we are like. So kind of going back to my roots in that sense, I mean, having Indian roots, I delved more into the aspect of what our, rich history and cultural heritage is about. And so I picked up the craft aspect, that being very, very part of my education, educative degree. Also, craft became, source of my inspiration after I finished my architecture. And although it may sound very tangible, but actually when we talk about traditional craftsmanship, which is a part of the intangible cultural heritage, it's a lot to do with the skill and the traditions that is carried down generations. Now, to express that skill and tradition, we obviously need a product that is basically more of a, I would say, contemporary analysis to a historical reconstruction of what happened in the past, what their traditions, cultures, and values were. So here we can see that there's a block printing situation going on, which is basically the block printing craft that is age is old in the world, but I think in Rajasthan it's about 2,000 to 3,000 years old. And for example, when we talk about the cultural value of this product, I was printing elephants, and it was very interesting because whenever people come to see or hear the stories of the products, I love to tell them a little bit of what it's about. So the artisans would always draw inspiration from their surroundings. And elephants is a very integral part of the the local Rajput culture, I would say, that we call the Hindu culture. Like, for example, none of the weddings were complete without the presence of an elephant. The king would always ride on an elephant. It was like a sign of grandiosity and glamour and also auspiciousness. And those elements were picked up and reflected in the blocks. And then it came onto the textile. So it's very interesting how the surrounding really inspired the artisans to actually, design their craft. Of course, the blocks that we see here, if I think that's what's going on there, is also handcrafted. It is hand carved, and then the fabric is completely originally, traditionally hand-woven cotton, and then there's a procedure what's going on. So this is one of the crafts that is reflected here. And so intangible cultural heritage can be expressed in many ways. And one of the ways is craft, and craft has a myriad, like a million types of crafts that's going on in India. And of course, the tangible cultural heritage would directly, be narrating the stories, like we see buildings and stuff. So yeah, that's a little bit about the cultural heritage. What also always, very interesting. I think these two lines really made a very deep impact on, what I follow as, as a design inspiration. Like, talking about intangible cultural heritage and craft. In craft, when we talk about it, it's a lot of material that we are working with the hand. And there is form follows function and craft follows culture. So when we talk about, for example, a form following a function, very interesting that every product that is handcrafted had an aesthetic value and a functional value. For example, if it's a wrist bangle, if we have to go back in time, and the bangles were discovered by archaeologists all over the world. We see them in Bahrain, we see them in India, and we see them everywhere else in Mohenjo-daro and the ancient civilizations. So for example, why would a bangle be round? Because it has a function. It has to beautify your wrist. And so that's how the shape of the product comes in. And then, of course, there's a lot of beautification around it, which could be to do with like the elephants, like I was talking before, or inspiration, which is coming down from, grandma stories, maybe some elephants, or, some kind of, art inspiration. So this form follows function forms a very integral part of every craft that we see. It's a balance of, aesthetic and the functional value of the product. And in turn, the craft follows a culture. So what we see, for example, down is a copper crafter who's been, working, of course, now they're based in Pune in Maharashtra, but this is where the belt of the Peshwas was at one particular point of time. And the metal craft was originated, for example, to do with weapons, coins, and of course pots for the the people of those times, and the Peshwas patronized them. And so they picked up a lot of aspects of the craft through the culture that was seen in those times. And when we kind of use that craft today, it reconstructs a history of the past. This narrates to us what where we came from, why, what were the locally available material, and how and what people wore, and what we as a civilization were, and how we are now. So it kind of roadmaps us to a point in time where the craft is born. So that's a very interesting part of the intangible cultural heritage. It also gives us a sense of belonging, and also cultural diversity, what we can imbibe from other cultures, also oftentimes a sense of national identity, and bonding and belonging, and so on. What I have been working with currently is been my journey with different types of crafts. There are many, many more types, but I've been very inspired with these few that I've listed out. And I can give you a little bit of a journey of probably weaving khadi. Okay, we'll go through it quickly, like weaving khadi. There was copper craft, the patola weaves, there's kalamkari pen art, which is again also 3000 BC old. There's block printing, leather, pottery. There's a applique work, which they call the katav, like Shirin was saying. It's an inspiration from the Barmer part of Rajasthan, and wood block printing, wood block carving. Actually, So interestingly, craft is, a balance of, like I said, aesthetic and functional, it gives you the aesthetic and functional value. And it's important that we don't function only because, the human race is eventually not we are actually evolving as a mechanistic society, but really handcraft is the original way in which we as a society would express our emotions and values through a balance of aesthetic and functionality within the product, and which is brought down from the skill. And I think that forms a very important part of what we are, because aesthetic is there's a lot of it's been philosophized a lot, and that taken away from what we use or from our everyday life would just make us very robotic and very mechanized. So really, handcraft is a revolution against the mechanistic evolution of society, and takes us back to our roots, kind of what we were, and where we are heading now. So yeah, it's interesting. It's very emotionally satisfying as well, because that does form a part of who we are as people, as as humans, as the human race. I will just go into a quick detail of the first one. It's not possible to go into the detail of all the crafts that I'm working with, which form a part of intangibility, but I would go into the first one that would give you a clearer idea of what it deals with. So that's a little map. That's a map. It's a very, it's a visual map of India, and it talks about the different textiles that we have, for example, where it originates from. And every textile has, for example,
Excuse me, Kavita, we
yes,
can't
Shri.
see the map. We can't see the map.
Okay. All right. Let me just go back and share the screen again. New share. Can you see that now? Okay. So, going back into the history of India, khadi was, it dates down centuries and centuries ago, actually, nearly as much as 3000 years old. But it was very much a part of the everyday life pre-British Raj in India. Like it was, the economic means and the sustainability means of, what was going on in the backyards of the artisans. Of course, there is a whole history that took over after that. But I work quite closely with these weavers in Bujori, which is a little village in the northwest part of Kutch. It's a border of Gujarat and Rajasthan. And some of the pictures that I'd like to share with you on my journey there. So, these are the little pictures that we see on the way to the village, which I took. And it got me thinking about, we see a lot of local culture within the artisans. We see a lot of traditions that they carry down generations. It's not only the craft they do, it's to do a lot with their lifestyles. For example, the weavers are called the Rabaris. They are the weaving tribe, which is a pastoral tribe. So they have basically their sheep, and which they take grazing on different lands from place to place, time to time, season to season. And they have these make and break houses, which they tent up, and they carry it on the backs of these camels, and they travel throughout Rajasthan in search of greener lands, and of course also to do with the weather. These are the women. Of course, now initially they would all be on camelbacks, but we see a little bit of modernization coming into the villages as well. So there they are in the rickshaw, and I was in the car. If you can see the front of the windshield. So yeah, it was very interesting, because this is how we are, we're actually closing down and going to Bhujori. On the way, for example, we see now khadi is all about cotton. It's basically a hand woven, hand spun cotton material that is completely chemical free, pesticide free, and it's only handmade. So it's very interesting, because intangible cultural heritage has a lot to do with the handwork. It was really defying the industrialization era. It stretches much beyond that. And so when we talk about handcraft today, we are actually dating back. You're bringing the history down to us from those times. And cotton was grown, of course, always. India has very fertile land where you just, throw in the seeds, and, there you have cotton plantations blooming, little buds, and then they come into these cotton balls that you can see. And then the women take out these balls, and then they kind of do it on the kargha, they call it the charkha, which goes around. I'm sorry, I had the video, but it's not playing. So the women spin them, and then into these yarns, which are very raw and they're very handmade. So you don't have like one thread which is straight. It's just handmade. It's very unique. It's just very very original. And yeah, so this is how the yarns are made, from these little cotton balls that we see on the way to the weavers' yards. And interestingly, this craft has a lot to do with, like, for example, this is, I would say, collaboration between the farmers and the weavers. So then there's a farmers that, the farmers' input that comes into the picture. Then the weavers buy the cotton from the farmers. And so it's a lot of rural value that's given to your craft, because there's no import export. Everything is locally available material. So interestingly, the weavers here, they make their base, in and around the cotton plantations. The cotton plantations depend on the local season. It depends on the locally available land and, the geographical structure of the place. So that's how the human civilization actually evolved in those times. And, what we are trying to do today is, as a society, retain those cultural values. Like you said, it's nearly a dying scenario there with cultural heritage. And then, as we go down closer to the places of these Rabaris, this is a mom there. And then we see my girls, they're fully modernized in their shorts and shirts, which is, there's a complete contrast of, of the human society there. They live in these handmade little huts, which are called the bhongas. Again, completely non-mechanized. Being an architect, we know what material goes into construction of the foundation of a building, or, the kind of drawings and plans we make. We talk about load, we discuss load structures, and we have an RCC consultant, plumbing, electrical, and so many things. But here we see that as a human civilization, they recognize their needs. And there they are, just constructing with locally available material and living a very peaceful life. And there is no, they're just self-made architects. So innovation was also a part of human society, which we are losing out today. Everything's very imported, exported, or bought. So yeah, and these bongas still today, are very weather friendly, local weather friendly. They don't have ACs, they don't have any kind of industrialized, of course, a little bit, maybe they have the gas cylinders and stuff, but probably even not. Actually, most of the houses that I went did have the original chulha where they light the fire with the, leftover firewood and stuff. So, there they are, the artisans, in combination with the farmers, living a very original local life, untouched with, modern day, I would say, industrialization. And carrying on the culture and heritage of those times. Right. This is the Rabaris again. They see a very traditional door there, which was, very ornate. So again, we see a lot of aesthetic and functional value in everything that they have within the household also. Because of the heat, for example, the Rabaris would have a very thick turban, because this is a part of the Thar desert. So they have this thick fabric. There are two reasons why the turban is big or small. One is of the weather conditions, and one is the status that you hold within the tribe. So the higher you are, the kingly you are, or you're the head of the tribe, you'll have like a different kind of a weave or a knot on the head. So and then they have this, I'm sorry, I forget what it's called. It's a very famous attire that they have. It's a double-breasted coat, not the Angarakha, it's called particularly something else. And again, local khadi woven, and it protects you from the summer. It keeps you well ventilated also, with the airy, and it looks beautiful. And it's become now an element of fashion today we see in our world. So, everything of those times or a heritage has a lot of functional value, and it's got aesthetic value. So I think that really makes it look very beautiful, very attractive to the human eye, because we can relate to it as humans, even though we may not be a part of the society. But it's very eye-catching, or it's very connectable. It's very conscious what they do or the way they live, and a little bit that we imbibe in our life. So even if we have some such attire or a product, makes us very connectable to what is connected to what is, what was of those times. So, it's also very important that we as humans go back to our roots, and we keep questioning what we are doing and why. This is Arjun Bhai, one of the Rabari's brothers. He's dyeing the indigo. And this is actually where I was with him. And he was explaining the whole process. Very interestingly, these indigo pits are dug deep into the ground, sometimes even 30 meters or 100 meters, 30 meters, I think, not 100, 30 to 40 meters deep into the ground. And then they have these vats that are left with these leaves, like green leaves, which is basically what the Indigofera tinctoria is the plant. And, they give out this color. They're left to ferment to a particular temperature or to a particular time, so that they're able to really give out the color when the fabric or the yarn is dipped into it. And this is the moment when I was telling him, Arjun Bhai, why don't you, why only 3 yarns? He's saying, no, because the indigo will catch fever today. If I do too much, usko bukhar aa jayega, he said. So I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, we can't exhaust it. Then I have to take care of him. He'll fall sick, And I said, what a connection they have with their craft is they respect every aspect of what they are or what they deal with. So that was a very learning experience for me from them. So we see that it's gone from the farmers to the weavers and spinners. Here, that's the spinning bar, they call in Gujarat, and that's the, mostly the women do the spinning and the men do the weaving. So even within the society, it, of course, now it's a form of an economic, it gives them cottage industry is giving a lot of the boost to the rural, fabric. I'm sure not only in India, but also in Sri Lanka and elsewhere. But, it had a lot of meaning, and, to carry on this meaning of the cultural values and traditions that they had, adds a lot of meaning to what we are doing or what we use or how we think, as a society, as individuals, or, just as people. Very interesting, actually, we're talking about industrialization. A lot of not only khadi weaving, but a lot of these other crafts that I deal with, I see that they leave very little carbon footprint, or none rather, or during the production. So for example, there's no leftover during, the cotton plantations. Anything that's leftover goes back into the soil and it immediately disintegrates, and it's gone back to nature to form, new, it's very biodegradable, which is something that I've seen that is a very integral part of intangible cultural heritage, or something that's brought down generations. Because, going green and, like talking about dumping, all this mess into the sea. And I think that is also a very learning point for us from, all of this. Of course, this is one of the aspects of the crafts. There are many. And then also intangible cultural heritage is also a lot of other aspects. But I see that the skill that they have really involves a lot of, elements of biodegradability, which is very much in line with nature. These are the videos that I wanted to show you. I'll give it a short try in case we still can share the video. But can you see anything, Shireen?
I can hear the sound, but not the video.
Okay, so fine. I will just let that be for right now. Okay, so that's the video. It was just the spinners. I'll try to see if I can send it across to you for those who would be interested in having a look at that. I'm just trying to go back to my screen. You can see the screen now? Oops. Okay. Share. Can you see the screen now? You can, right? Okay. So, right now, what we are doing as a part of craft revival, or I would say, going, holding fort for our intangible cultural heritage, which is basically the crafts, is showcasing them in different ways, using them, in different products, kind of making this craft, a wearable art or a part of everyday life. I think that is what we as people, can be more conscious about, whether we can substitute, a very industrialized or mechanized product with something which is more artistic and also holds a lot of, artisanal and heritage value. We see here that, the production of such a piece it takes a lot of energy, time, and effort. It is non-mechanized. We see here an artisan's loom, which was, just recently, actually last year, this was destroyed with the floods and the rains, that happened there. And of course, when we see, not wanting to defame Zara, but, also we see that, we have these huge discounts and sales and all of these, dollar shirts that have a lot to do with exploitation of people, which was not there during the handcraft era, I would say. Of course, mass production brings down the cost of an element. It takes away the economic and social value of these artisans, of the rural area of a country. We see mass production over handmade. Of course, we don't see any human touch here when we have a mass-produced item. It's very mechanized, but a human-made or a handmade craft has a lot of, not only aesthetic and functional, but I always tell my folks that it really breeds consciousness. Every piece of fabric that is hand woven never feels the same, because every artisan has a different hand on the loom. Like some of them have a tight hand, some of them have a looser hand. So these little traditions that have been brought down generations really speaks a lot for the personal human values and culture. Of course, there's a lot of advertising misconception that goes on with the modern day products versus really a handcraft. These artisans don't have an international platform to speak on, and but I think it's not only me. A lot of us have also been, are aware of the value that this handcraft carries, and I think we are slowly going back to the roots. So that is a good aspect of what I would say is modern day analytical contemporary analysis. What I generally also believe in to keep the intangible cultural heritage alive is buy local, because local does has to do a lot with people, discourage brand mall shopping as much as possible, support local artisan businesses, and of course we always don't have a ticking machine at the end of a product. Why I'm talking about a product is because that is the way that an artisan really expresses himself or carries on his cultural heritage. Because the skill has to be expressed as a product. Like the product is a means of expressing, the skill of an artisan. And what I, as a designer, do is bringing contemporary styles through their, skills. So I do a lot of tweaking and, adding, what our day-to-day needs are in terms of functionality or aesthetic into the products. Where traditional, it's very interesting. Sadhguru always says once a week, if all of us wore something traditional, it would keep alive the cottage industry. So basically, that's how far we are from it at the moment. And of course, learn and talk about craft, art, and culture of these artisans, like what we are doing today. And so that's a little bit about the khadi weaving, which is a part of the crafts that I was, talking about. There are a million other types of crafts. So there is a lot of, detailed skill that has been brought down through these forefathers via the artisans, which is, what we are trying to hold from disintegrating in today's time. And so, yeah, like khadi is just a little aspect. Then, like Shireen was saying, like, intangible cultural heritage could be to do with cuisines. It could do with the folk dances, festivals. It's also oral traditions that's been passed down generations. So it is interesting that, I don't know whether to say that the cup is half empty or half full is, it's a tough question, is how we look at it. But yes, I would say that people are more aware of this importance. And like Shireen was saying, 2003, UNESCO also brought this down as, under their banner, talking about, cultural and intangible cultural heritages. And every little craft, for example, every craft in all of these and more, has a lot to talk about the historical values that was, or the, I would say, the traditions that people carry down, like the kalamkari is, for example, the South Indian craft. It talks a lot about the Ramayana and the Mahabharata stories, the locally available material. It's very interesting. It's very intriguing, actually, each part. And I think we can always find, ways and means to link up with these or use these in our daily lives, so that we as people eventually help holding back this cultural like be a part of the craft revival. And I think people, if at some point pre or post industrialization, realize that this mass production is going, taking us completely away from our roots. It's dehumanizing, I would say, or mechanizing the ways in which we think. Actually, even I think in some, even when we watch the news nowadays, we see that everything has become so mechanized. It's so robotic that we really have to, stop, think back and say, okay, now, there's got to be a way in which we connect with ourselves as a society. So craft revival, I would say, is a very integral part of that, self-connection. And, I would say connection is also the meaning of yoga. And it's also yoga in which you kind of, go back to your roots, understand what we were as a human civilization, what are we doing, why are we here, and all these kind of questions also arise. It can philosophize a little as well. Yeah, and the objective of craft revival is to revitalize this, create a market segment for artisans at global level, enhance the livelihood. Obviously, it gives creates employment for people, an opportunity for artisans, and it gives them a new dimension to this traditional art, and yet it maintains its value. So it's not that we are trying to substitute their skill. We maintain their value, we maintain their skill, but bring in contemporary ideas so that it's also practical and appealing for us to use them. We are upholding their culture, which is a part of our society, or their skill, and and keeping this intangible cultural craft alive. That's why we see that a lot of these people in today's world, architects and archaeologists, these historic forts and palaces have a lot of value. Like, to bring down a fort in any particular place is actually nearly impossible. People really want to maintain and retain their culture because it's a place for tourism. People visit, they understand what civilizations were, how we are connected. So all of these questions arise, during the process of, connection with tangible or intangible cultural crafts. So yeah, in my own little way, I'm, I'll do little workshops. For example, I've picked up block printing as an integral part of workshops. And it's very intriguing, actually. Every time we do a workshop, everybody says, my God, we realize this is the amount of skill that is required, to kind of carry out this piece of fabric that we have. So that was, I hope, a little window into what, I do, and my journey as, I would say, a little bit of my contribution to hold this intangible cultural craft that I've picked up from, disintegrating and kind of going back to our roots and, connecting down at some point with all of us as human society. So yeah, that was, I don't know in short or long, but let me see if I can stop share screen. Okay. That was a little bit about myself and what I do, Shireen. Over to you.
Can you tell us a little on the dyeing techniques you've been talking to me about, the different types of natural dyes?
Right.
The
Actually,
processes?
I do have, for example, some of the yarns, like this one is an indigo yarn. And if, you can, so, okay, now I'll just tell you what, okay, this is basically the original cotton fiber that is hand woven. It can be dyed into, for example, an indigo yarn, or it can be dyed into this madder root color, which is a red color. So there are many types of dyeing techniques. traditionally, a lot of these artisans have used locally available material, which is leaves and minerals. Indigo is a very different type of a dyeing technique where you dig a pit and you kind of ferment these indigo leaves and they let out color and fabric. But color is also brought a lot from spice dyes, like the turmeric dyes yellow. This madder root is a very integral part of red color dyeing that we call manjish dye in India. And so this is the dyeing of the fabric. And these were very much in line with ecology as well. Like you see, like I was saying, even if we had to let run the extra color, this would just go down into the soil and into the river and just form silt, which is again biodegradable. So that is, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting how these techniques were very much in line with ecology. But are you particularly talking about a kind of a dye, or you want to talk about blocks
The
now?
process of extracting the dyes, etc. I mean,
Okay.
there wouldn't have been any technology involved. So how would they have in those days done it?
Right. So, you know how we talk about how fire was made, and there are different theories that there were two men who were rubbing the stone and then there were sparks and then the fire came out. So whether that's true or whether that's a story, it's interesting, but that's, you know, something that's, uh, it could have happened. Now, how originally the indigo came through, we see that, you know, food, shelter, and clothing were basically the basic three main aspects of the basic human necessities. And then when we talk about, so during the process of discovery of either and or all of these, you know, there were, for example, food, you know, a lot of, you have to fill your stomach first before you get into the aesthetic aspects of human life. But during the process, there were some spice dyes, and there were like, you know, in earlier civilizations that we heard, especially in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, where people, you know, stained their hands, or they, you know, used all these products to, so humans eventually slowly started familiarizing themselves with products that were, you know, harmless to them. So things that you can eat, you can obviously put on your skin, you can obviously wear. So it started off with the food aspect. The humans started discovering different aspects of spices that they used during their food, or if there was a wound cut, they would put turmeric, and then they realized, oh, this is getting stained, you know. And so when they wanted to add more aesthetic to their functional, for example, covering their body, they realized that we could dye also turmeric into the fabric. So this is how, you know, there are concepts that, you know, dyes were derived or were inspired from food products because they were so eco-friendly. Also, even beauty products, like we talk about Cleopatra bathing in this milk and rose petals, because they're all like, you know, eco-friendly items. You know, you want to, and what happened is during industrialization, we lost all of that. And we eventually started, you know, producing these man-made colors or man-made beauty products, and we went away. But I think now it's been a time we really want to go back to, you know, skip all of that and go back to what it was to be completely in line with, you know, ecology, with nature. So a lot of spice dyes were very inspirational towards, you know, fabric dyeing, like madder root, turmeric, indigo, henna. Henna was, of course, a beauty product that was discovered. So we see a lot of henna dyes. There is something called the kashish, which is a mineral. It's not edible, but then people discovered that, okay, if we can have the indigo, indigo is also not edible really, but kind of started staining fabric and, you know, the hand and stuff. So things which were directly derived from nature were inspiring, and they were really initially the first dyeing products that were discovered. So turmeric, madder root, indigo, all of these were, you know, the colors also very earthen and are directly, you know, very, very natural products. I mean, even now when we go to the villages, we can see that these people are dealing with natural products. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then there are different ways and means, like, they have jaggery, the molasses, which is left over from the sugar cane after they make the good that we call the jaggery, which is the, original sugar or the sweetener, is also a very, very important aspect of the black color dyeing. So these are the things which really inspired people, and all of them have different techniques. So they discovered it over a period of time. Okay, indigo, we ferment, it's how the grandma's recipe got passed down, with the pickles and the achars, and this is how it happens with the artisans, back in their generation. I mean, which is brought down until today. So they all have their little secrets. They all have their different techniques, and it's very interesting because even, for example, a fabric like this is dipped in castor oil overnight before you dye it. For example, indigo is called harade. It's an Ayurvedic element. So there's a mordant and a fixative, and there's a whole, technical detail, which is, the skill. That is the cultural heritage that is passed down from one artisan to another, to carry on. And, that's how we kind of have the indigo dyeing until today. Yeah. I hope that kind of clarifies. Can you hear me?
Unmute yourself.
Questions open to the floor.
So, Kavita, my concern, it's not even a question, is that everyone seems to be talking about, protecting the crafts and things like that. And you see a lot of designers getting into this scene where they talk about natural fabrics and working with artisans and villages, and they price their clothes so exorbitantly, and you keep wondering that does it filter back to these artisans, or is everyone making their own profit in the name of protecting craft? It feels like a fad, because you see a lot of Indian designers talking this way, but what is the comparison of, say, like an Anita Dongre or a Ritu Kumar, their pricing to the cost of production of these fabrics, right? And how can it then reach the average person who's going to be more of a consumer in volume, and will sustain this craft rather than the designers?
I think that's a very interesting and important point that you've brought up, Rekha. And yes, so, I think as a designer, it's very important to be conscious, of what you're doing. I think that is the first calling, especially when you're dealing with, rural craft, because like you said, these people are not aware of the international platform, or even, for example, exploitation, because I know I've dealt with them, very simple people. So I think as a designer, it is definitely very important to have the right balance, that you are being really conscious about what you're doing. So I know a lot of designers, and I mean, I don't know if I should name them, but a lot of design houses, for example, with whose artisans I am working with, and a lot of these people say, Didi, they give us, like, say, 1 lakh meters of block printing to do, and the manager just comes in and he says, okay, this is what we want, and then that's it. We don't get paid enough for what we are doing. So I think it puts a lot of responsibility on the designer to be, to have that, because ultimately, as a human race, there has to be some satisfaction. If really the money is the driving point, then you've really not got the point. So in fact, a lot of people have even approached me saying, can you give me the number of this artisan or that, and XYZ? And I said, see, the first thing is to ask yourself, what is your calling? Because if you're just driven by the economic value of the craft, then you really not got the point at all. So I probably, I don't know if I'm, see, I know what I can take responsibility for myself. Like I know what I am involved in or what I am doing. But I know designers who may look like are really working with artisans. I know recently, I think even Sabia Sachi is doing stuff with local crafters, especially I think the Zardozi weavers, the Zardozi embroiders. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not very sure. But I haven't dealt with the Zardozi weavers directly yet in central India. But it's, I think it is, you know, I mean, all I can say about this is really, if you're driven only by the money, then you've lost the point. You've really, you know, it's, it's just, you've just lost the battle, because that's not the idea. If you're not holding back, that's then holding an intangible cultural craft on from disintegrating is become a secondary point, which is really not the point. The point is to put them on the public platform in a way that you can express, the collaboration has to be very, fair. It has to be a fair trade. Otherwise, you've lost the point. So yes, I'm not denying a lot of people have been there looking out for the economic value only, really probably, losing out on the whole in, craft and culture that they carry. And yeah, I mean, because for example, it is a lot of effort and time that you need to put to understand that we don't want to shift their base. We don't want to shift who these crafters are. We really want to just add value or create kind of employment for them, because that is the satisfying point. So I will not disagree. There are a lot of people out there, in the name of holding back the craft, but are really not adding value to what is supposed to be, how it is.
Are they aware, the artisans aware that they are being exploited? Are they aware that there's a large profit margin
Um,
generated by the
okay, so
supposed
I'll tell you
designer?
about the Khadi weavers, for example. He is very well set, Arjun Bhai and his family. So the government of India is also doing a lot of work for them. They've, also created these awards, like different craft awards, and they're called from time to time for, for these exhibitions. So, besides the designers, there are other platforms as well. The government is trying to reach out, like every artisan has an iCard, and they have, like we have the Aadhaar, like that's the identity, of the CPR. They all have an artisanal CPR in India now. Mostly, I think 99% of them have registered themselves, and the government is trying to, make them aware of, different kind of exhibitions where they can reach directly to the people. But mm, like Arjun Bhai, for example, will not get exploited. He knows exactly what it takes for his craft to, to be made, the kind of work that he needs. So I think there's been a lot of change. I mean, in the last 10 years, from what we see to what they are now, they are very much aware. So I think that is also making a lot of difference to the people. Like, they will not let down. They say, no, this is the cost, this is what it involves. And I like that, because that really speaks, because they know what, see, craft is actually priceless. There is no price for the amount of work that they do, but at least it has to pay back for the hours of work that they are doing, so I think a lot of them are aware. At least I have seen a lot of change in the last 10 years in these artisans. And yeah, they will not compromise on a lot of things, because there's a lot of government backing also, and I think that has been quite something that I have seen. So yeah, I definitely think that they would be aware if, people are getting exploited. I haven't really, like, individual designers, like small time designers, there's no scope for exploitation. But big houses like Anokhi is doing a lot of work with them. I know that Anokhi, the lady is the wife, Brigitte Singh. She's the wife of an Indian architect, and she's actually gone down to each house and spoken to the artisans. And really, they've made a little haveli below the Amir fort, so they've documented a lot of things for the artisans. And but there are other big houses, design houses, which have been trying to exploit them. So I think individual designers, there's less scope, but big houses, where when they try to so-called mass produce these items, is a point of concern. But also, people are also being aware, so there's this whole scenario going on simultaneously, of being aware and of stopping this, and and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's been my experience, dealing directly with them.
Talking of heritage and craft and what and art, we talk of thousands of years of something of thousands of years. My mind got me to think, we the contemporary society, if we base ourselves as something in history so many years from now, what would craft be defined as in contemporary? You know what I'm saying? If we
Yeah.
are the historical base 2000 years from now,
Yeah.
what would the 2000 years from now society identify as craft of
Of
now,
today's
of
time.
2022, of 2022?
Yes. Interesting. So, as the years have passed down, a lot of these crafts have intermingled, like, with the invasions of the Mughals, for example, in India, the just during the Rajput rule, during the British rule. So with the invasions of the Mughal, there was a lot of intercultural craft, that took place as well. So like, the Mughals, the kings got married to Rajput wives, and then their kingdoms would come together. The artisans would also, come down as like one. So I think that is what we talk about, is that the patterns of change in society, that basically is what we study as an intangible cultural heritage. So what role we are playing today, what kind of craft we are patronizing. Craft is a little beyond just the basic necessities of human life. So, you would need, for example, a king would patronize, a very beautifully or luxurious patola weave. So you'd also definitely need a patron, or somebody who's, offering you a need of that particular craft in everyday life, for example, a wedding or a festival. And I think that is one role we are playing today, is what I feel. Well, we can, whether we are, but it's a, there's a lot of imitation of craft, like people are doing a lot of patola prints, which is very unfortunate, but this is how we, in one sense, one part of the society is heading that direction. People are looking to for cheaper means which look exactly like, a handcraft, but is not a handcraft. And then there's really one part of society which is trying very hard to really honestly revive the craft. And then there's another part of society, like Rekha was saying, which is trying to, exploit the whole system ecologically and economically. So I think somewhere, if we identify what role we are playing, is what is going to be carried down in the next generation. Whether we lose what 2022 could be as a design aspect really depends on what we are looking for today, or what kind of art we are, imbibing in our lives today. So I'm sure there would be a part of us which would carry down this heritage, and so on and so forth, probably create new designs, newer needs. And, I mean, in those times, basically, everything was very, society was more united. They were like looking, really having more of a one vision. I think now society has like everybody fragmented visions, like everybody has their own vision. Like one is really chasing economy, one is looking to, get the craft ahead. So it's a question that, probably time will tell where we head down, 50 to 100 years down the line. But I do hope that this kind of awareness, really reaches out to people, and they understand the importance and the value of holding back this cultural craft. So we really identify ourselves as that part of society which is carrying down this, cultural heritage, and not, kind of look at it so much as a short-term gain, basically, because we are wanting to pass down this legacy eventually. So it's a question that time will tell. But I do hope, and I do think that there should be some museum pieces or antique pieces that we create today that, could hold value, tomorrow, years down the line.
That was what I asked you. What is the 2022 museum piece of 3022?
Yeah, that's the thing, it's how many grandmothers recipes we really pass down to the next generation. I think the present is not over yet, so we have to keep passing on this awareness. We see that in our immediate generation, like with the children. I think that could be the first contribution, that what we are doing for the, how aware we are making the next generation. Leave aside the generations we have not seen, but how much are our children aware of not only craft, but even like, home remedies, healing techniques, for example, or, cuisines, what part of our culture they are carrying on. I think that will decide a lot on, what, we as people would be defined as 100 years down the line. So I think the present is really in our hands. And, interesting. I mean, I'm sure even in the past, societies had their challenges. They also had a fragmented vision. It's not that they were all, I'm sure there were people who were exploiting even in those times, but even then, now we have their legacy. So it's in the hands of the people who are aware to carry this ahead. I think that is, my take home point from your question.
I think earlier they didn't have competition from mass production, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you would choose what to wear, maybe like
Yes.
a khadi or a patola or a jamdani or whatever. The competition would be between maybe a level playing field in the sense between crafters. But now with retail and mass production, and then the copying of these prints into synthetic fabrics, that is a big challenge, right?
Absolutely. I know, having said that, I mean, I completely agree with that. Yet, I would say, like, as a human civilization, we've really, in numbers, grown a lot. So, in that sense, I think that there could be a lot of value that we hold.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Also, the social media platform that we have is something where, people could be more aware of consciously sharing even a cultural heritage. I'm not talking about craft. I'm talking about anything that we want to pass on as a legacy. The awareness factor, it's like, technology, how we use, whether we misuse it or use it, it's in our hands. So I think that responsibility is really upon us as individuals to pass this on and, use technology or use, the numbers that we are now. I don't know how many billions we are on earth, to carry this on and create more awareness, necessity, and of cultural values to pass this ahead. Reduce small shopping as much as possible, small things like really going, looking for biodegradability, and I think these are all interlinked at some point. A very holistic and sustainable lifestyle would actually link us to intangible cultural heritage. I think that is the point where we are.
True. The only point here is, Kavita, that to be sustainable and do this is costing much more for an average person than what we would do if we were to stick to the retailers, So, considering that our with inflation, with the world in turmoil, it really curtails our spending power, right? And then I guess all these things also suffer.
Absolutely. And I think, so I absolutely agree with that. I think the spending power is definitely curtailed, all this economic disbalance that's going around. At the same time, I think we are hoarding too much. I think we can do with minimum stuff, even if it's holistic and natural. We can do with, we want 5 chutneys on our shelf, and we want, 10 types of saris.
But Kavita, when you see the saris, you become so greedy. I don't mind not having the chutneys, but I want that sari,
Yeah, that's true.
That's a sad part.
Though that's true.
I'm sure, Reena's here. Reena's another person who looks at weaves and wears. I've seen it quite often. And it's just you go down that road, there is no end. It's a rabbit hole. You're down, sinking.
No, that's true. And actually, that's one of the
It's called it the sari hole.
True. I mean, actually, think that's the reason why the kings patronized this, the royalty really patronized this, the crafts at one particular point, because, they could take it out from a treasury. But, yes, I think, it's an ongoing question, actually, that,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's a very gray line between whether what we should have, but I think eventually we should, head towards holistic, minimal, and really authentic. I mean, nowadays, we see this beautiful pearl. Bahrain is, known for pearls. And I had this craze for pearls. And I said, I want to go and pick up this pair of earrings. And I saw this girl wearing this beautiful, she's a Bahraini friend. I said, wow, where did you pick this? I want this kind of exact earrings. She's saying, Kavita, these are 10 BD. I said, you're a Bahraini and you're wearing this, why aren't you buying authentic pearls? So, expensive, she said, but I said, no. So I, as a person, would never wear a 10 BD pearl earring. I'm a small but really authentic one.
Excuse me, they won't be pearls, it'll be plastic.
I think, yeah, it's interesting because, for example, talking about pearls, it has a lot of also value when you wear them. Like, it's supposed to connect you to the, astral rays and moons and blah. So all of these things have a value. It's also not only aesthetic, it's got a functional value within your, your everyday system. So I think minimal but authentic should be something that we should try to, imbibe. We, of course, as women, we are very attracted to the aesthetic value of, aesthetic beauty of a product, but it also has, like khadi, for example, when you wear, it's so natural. It's never going to give you itchiness or rash or so I think that to me matters a lot, that even if it's not visible, it's got to be authentic. So I think we all can lay down certain, of course, it's not always affordable, like Rekha rightly said. So maybe just be happy with minimum, but authentic is important for me as a person, So yeah, but it's a tough one.
Thank you, Kavita.
Where have you married Bahrain and Indian intangible cultural heritage? What are the marriages that you've been able to forge?
So I have been working with the Ali potters, lately, been doing these teacups. I don't have them here right now, but I brought in the design idea of having like the kulhad, which was the teacups in India. We would have of a particular shape. They were used once and kind of, just dismantled and thrown and then reused. And I tried to bring that into, and I mean, it's amazing because people have really received it very well, like the karak chai. And it's very interesting. And I'm glad you actually asked me this question, because a lot of these people who've bought or who use the cups have said, chai has been such an integral part of Bahraini culture as well. And we love these cups and we so relate to the culture. So it gives me a lot of satisfaction when, like you said, two crafts and two cultures are intermingled, and we see, common platform, and we see a lot of common lines that we can, draw between both of them. So yeah, I've been doing leather craft as well here with one Adil Al-Salawi. His grandfather was at the, Royal Camel Farm, and, they use obviously the halal camel leather, because that's very important for me, that we use ahimsa products, like cruelty-free products. So I've been doing leather craft and the kulhars, which is basically the teacups. And I think that's where a lot of the Indian designs have been, quite in my own small way, but yeah, well received here in Bahrain. And yeah,
I myself have been your good customer, Kavita.
Yes, you have.
It has gone all the way to Jordan.
Oh,
Let
really?
me tell you, that's what brought me to you, Kavita, having a chai at Rekha's in your kulhar. Yes.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's really amazing, because even I made actually, Diwali diyas with Mathim. He's the potter that I work with, and And I asked him, I said, Methim, I need to fire these, like, Yani, I need to put the wick and it has to fire. He's saying, I know Diwali. We watch Bollywood movies all the time. I know Diwali.
No, Diwali.
So he's like, Zain. I've picked up a lot of Arabic with him, which is very interesting. So he was like, this, and it's very interesting. I mean, interactions with these people is also very interesting. So, and I went there and I went to his, pottery yard, and he was playing this loud Hindi music with his Arabic subtitles. I said, yeah, exactly that. He's like, I know Diwali, hum malum Diwali, so. Yeah, so I think these are some beautiful interactions that I've come across, while working with the local artisans, and of course my culture would reflect in whatever I kind of do. So yeah, doing the Indian designs. Yeah.
Shireen, shall we wind up? Okay. So, somebody's signing in, Sapna. So sweet. Sapna, we're just winding up. So sorry to say this, but you missed an interesting session. However, we have the recording which we will send to you. Thank you so much, Kavita. It was really nice to hear your story all over again, though we discuss this every time we meet. And I must say that both the Sita Ki Doli have been framed and put up in my daughter's house.
How lovely.
I must send you pictures,
Please do.
and both look amazing. And thank you so much for being with us. And maybe we should attend some of your workshops that you keep doing, and every single time it clashes. But it was lovely to have you here. And thanks to Shireen for thinking, though she discovered you through the kulhards in my kitchen.
Oh.
I'm glad that she brought you here, and it was very interesting talk. And maybe we should go into other crafts and do another session with you again. Thank you, Kavita.
Thank you so much, Rekha. Thank you, Shireen, for giving me this platform to be able to share what I do. It's very dear to me. So I loved, sharing and, getting all these thoughts together. And yeah, so the Kulhar has brought us all together on one platform. And
the applique tablecloths, which was also a very poignant thing. You
Yeah.
talked to me about the tents and how these guys darn their tents, and I'm thinking, good Lord, is that what got the tablecloth so beautiful, It was
yeah.
a beautiful narrative that you gave me on that.
Oh, thank you. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
Yeah.
that. And I
I
feel very
always end up going to her house to buy one thing, and she knows what I end up with. I tell her, don't bring out stuff. That's what it is.
I'm quite known to be quite notorious, actually.
Thank you, Kavita. See you soon.
Thank you very much, Shireen. And
Reena,
thank you.
I shall send you Kavita's number. You can go for the kulhards.
Scarves as well, saris, bedspreads, you can, I'll give you the merchandise.
The rest to follow.
Wonderful.
Renuka.
All right.
Kali.
Bye. Bye.
And bye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Bye.